He's telling me. Okay, welcome everyone to our first Helene Recovery Work Session. This is a formal or informal work session where we don't take public comment, but we will be taking a break at the end of this, and then we will begin our city council meeting at 5 o'clock. So, who should I kick it off to? Okay, Bo Mills, please, why don't you introduce your team, and thank you for being here, and tell us a little bit about yourselves.
Excellent. My name is Bo Mills. I work with a firm called Fountain Works, which does facilitation. We work for literally hundreds of sessions with local governments across the state.
Dan is going to yell at you to talk into that microphone.
Yes.
And yeah, if you want.
Oh, you can do the walking microphone too. That's another option.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Can Dan hear me now?
Well,
In his
and
little
so
booth
can all
somewhere?
of the thousands of people watching this live, streaming it for
No
hundreds
pressure,
of
no
thousands,
pressure.
or the tens of tens.
Tens.
Yeah.
Tens of 11.
Well, I'm excited to be here. My name is Bo Mills. I am your facilitator today, as well as an advisor, so I'll talk about that in a minute. I work with a firm called Fountain Works, which has been working with local governments for 20 plus years. I have two team members here with me. First, Emily Wilson, who's been with Fountain Works for almost 5 years now.
Going on 4.
Going on 4, okay. And she's originally from Tennessee, I believe. And then we're also really honored to have Susanna Childers, who is a very experienced facilitator, both at the corporate level and nonprofit and government level. So we're really fortunate to have the A team here behind me. I recently retired from the League of Municipalities on September 30th. I worked with a group called the Metro Mayors Coalition, of which your mayor was the chairperson who hired me in 2018, much to her chagrin, I'm sure.
My chagrin, you're leaving that position.
And I would just one quick aside. Deborah organized, along with the mayor, a session at the Metro Mayors Conference that was held last week in Wilmington. And we had a team from Wilmington there that they brought up to talk to all the other mayors about the experience that you had. And I will tell you, it was really a highlight of 2 days together with all the mayors and the city managers of our state's larger cities. It was quite extraordinary hearing about the collaboration and the work that your community has done and what you've been through. And Clay gave a nice presentation, showed drone video of what you all have been through and the impact of it. And at one point, I think that there was some tears from some of the folks in the room, especially as he talked about what it took to get the water system reconnected. And I think it was really quite extraordinary. We also had a video from Governor-elect Stein at the session that we were welcoming us to coming together in Wilmington. But he spent, of the 5-minute video, 3 minutes talking about how important it was that everyone in North Carolina work hard to help Western North Carolina recover from this extraordinary disaster. So what we're going to do today is we'll go ahead and pull up the agenda. I think, Deborah, is this your 4th council meeting since the storm, 4th or 5th? I mean, you have not had a chance to get this group together. Wow. That's so hard. So one of the things we want to do, the outcomes of this conversation today would be beginning to build a shared understanding of the recovery process. Discuss how we can all work together better, and then set the stage for your council retreat, which has multiple purposes. Obviously the budget, but we also want to talk about recovery and your strategic vision going forward. So those are some of the outcomes. This is just the beginning of a conversation, giving you an opportunity to talk. You haven't had that. Stuff's been coming at you. This is an opportunity for you to talk a little more. Our roles here, obviously you would be engaged participants and respectful of each other. We're going to walk you through a facilitated process for some of those. Your senior staff are here as observers, and then we, Fountain Works, will be as a team facilitating our conversations today. But I'll also, as a 35-year public servant, will also share some of my perspectives as an advisor. And when I wear that advisor hat, I'll be very clear as opposed to facilitator. So And we're going to capture all the information generated here today. So yes, ma'am. Is that closer? Thank you, Dan, in the other room.
Dan's in the basement listening to you, yeah.
That's great. So we're going to talk about the long-term planning review process, talk about the disaster recovery lens, and then we're going to talk with you about what is really important to you, and then how do we all work well together. And then we'll have a quick wrap up and talk about maybe a few things about the upcoming retreat. So does that sound like a good plan for you, Mayor?
And, yeah, and council, okay. And we did circulate the agenda ahead of time, so folks had a little information about what to anticipate.
Okay, so I'm going to put on, just for a moment, my advisory hat. As I said, I've been working in Washington and in Raleigh around public service for quite some time. I worked at the federal level for a member of Congress. I worked at the White House for a little while. But most importantly for the conversations here, I worked in Governor Jim Hunt's office as part of the team. My initial role was an environmental advisor to him. But after Hurricane Floyd hit, it was all hands on deck. Everyone was talking about the recovery from Hurricane Floyd. So I spent a lot of time working with a broad team that we had in Governor Hunt's office managing the recovery from Hurricane Floyd, which before this, I think may have been the single largest disaster that anyone has gone through. So I have some experience in that. So I'm going to share my intergovernmental expertise and talk to you a little bit about what, from my perspective, the things that are going to be most successful. But the first thing I wanted to do is just to remind everyone, you have been through, and you know this, you've been through a traumatic experience. This is, I think, certainly in modern history, the biggest disaster that North Carolina has ever been through. When we were in Wilmington, I was talking with the mayor of Wilmington. He said, the things he has seen and learned about what you've been through are so, so different than the experiences that the coastal hurricanes have been. So it's a very, very different experience. And the nature of this, the damage to your infrastructure, the dislocation in the community, it is on par, frankly, and it's not getting the media coverage for a variety of reasons, but it's on par with Katrina, frankly. I mean, that's what you're experiencing now. So as we think about that, it must be really difficult as a city council because you're the board of directors for the city. You provide the guidance, the policy, the direction, but you're experiencing something that's very tangible and very real right in front of you as you go through this. I mean, September 27th, here we are, December. You've been through a traumatic experience and you haven't had a chance to really engage with the recovery process. And that's because we're not quite there yet. We're still in the response mode. And we're going to have Haggerty, and Tracy Phillips is going to join us in a minute and talk about the disaster recovery framework. But I wanted to sort of put this in a context to relate to the way we do government in North Carolina, the way we do local government. And the way I viewed this, it's almost as though, and I was talking to the mayor about this, and it seemed like it worked. Think of Asheville as a patient who has been through a traumatic experience. You've been hit by a car, or you've been in an auto accident, and the ambulance comes and it brings you to the hospital, into the emergency room. The emergency medical personnel, what are they doing? They're just quickly trying to stabilize the patient. They're trying to, they put them on the gurney, they're putting them in the operating room, they're trying to stem the bleeding, they're trying to identify what it is that's really impacting this patient. How do we save this patient? How do we stabilize it? How do we save the life of this patient? So that's the process you've been through. As you go through the process in an emergency room, then they get x-rays, they're getting more information. They're gathering, they're talking to the radiologist about what's happening with this patient. They're trying to figure out what's the damage, where are the problems with this patient. Then they maybe are starting to consult, maybe they talk to the patient, they're learning, they're getting a patient history. They're gathering information, and that's where you start the recovery process. So first we stabilize the patient. That's the process we've just finished, or maybe even in some ways, you're just now stabilizing the patient here in Asheville. You've discovered where the problems were. You've tried to stabilize the patient. It's a difficult situation. That's when we start engaging with the family members. After we stabilize the patient, now we're starting to talk about what surgeries do we need to perform to help this person recover from this traumatic experience. Then you start talking to the patient's family about rehab. To me, that's the long-term recovery process that you're getting ready to start thinking about. What is it going to take to get this patient back on their feet, make them as strong and healthy as they were before? So I don't know if that rings true to you, but from a perspective of a city council, you're the family. You're waiting in the waiting room trying to figure out what's happening to my patient. We have all these emergency responders. They've stabilized the patient. Now we're starting to talk about the long-term rehab of this patient. So that's sort of, I wanted to help understand the role that you all are playing. You're the family. You're going to be part of the long-term recovery. What is it going to take to get that person to the physical therapist? What are the things that we're going to do to help make this person stronger and healthier in the future? So that's the process. From my perspective, that's a way to envision what you're getting ready to go through here. So that's, and I'll go ahead and ask Tracy to come on up now. Think about that as Tracy describes to you the framework for recovery and the response to a disaster. Tracy, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Okay, thanks, Fred. I'll do this one. Thank you. Hello, everyone. It's good to see you again. I'm Tracy Phillips with Haggerty, and I've been working with the Deborah and the city team on the recovery for Asheville. I'm going to, you've seen this chart before, and you'll see it again. This is the flow of a recovery process, and it's got an overlay to it of the National Disaster Recovery Framework. I've been a recovery professional for going on 30 years now, and I've worked every catastrophic event since 9/11. And I can tell you that as this framework has been developed, the communities that respond to events and use this framework as guidance for how they participate in the recovery of their community. And the more they refer to it, the more successful they are. So that's why you'll see us repeat it. Just because if you look at the hills, if you look on the graph, you'll see how they all overlap, particularly in that middle phase where you have 3 different of the hills that are happening at the same time. Everyone likes to say recovery is not brain surgery. It's not, but it is very complex. And when you've got these many new overlapping concepts that folks are trying to operate with, and at a tactical level try to recover within that time frame between the short term and an intermediate recovery, it's hard to do. You have a great number of stakeholders with interest in what's happening here. I've given you some examples of what's happening in these different phases. And what also makes it complex is because there's no set criteria as to where one ends and the other begins. You're doing several things at once. So where we are right now is in that short-term recovery where response, when you talk about things like emergency housing and debris, those are ongoing, and debris is probably going to be ongoing for quite some time. It's much larger and broad in scope than it was initially thought, and so that's ongoing for us. Mass care and sheltering is, that has tailed off, but now we're trying to find intermediate housing and moving into the next phase of recovery. So here I've overlaid on the same graphic the federal overlay of resources that are available to your community in these phases of recovery across the framework. Right now, the Haggerty team is particularly focused on your cost recovery as for infrastructure reestablishment and making repairs and restoration, finding mitigation opportunities, particularly around your water system transportation, those sorts of things. And these are the sources that we go to help find federal dollars that doesn't have to come out of the pocket of the local community. You'll see in the long term that that's when you start seeing, that's usually like a year to 2 years where you start seeing CDBG DR funding and those other pots of money that are available. We have a new one on here that I particularly want to point to, and that's IIJA. That is the BIL programs, where we've spoken about this before, where there's still almost $1 trillion left in that, particularly of interest to you guys, and what we're looking at in our, I'm a long-term recovery specialist, and in our planning for that, building a framework for you on how to look at the grants, particularly around water infrastructure and roads and bridges that might be available to you, that would supplement what FEMA does so that you can build back better. This is as a part of your resilience framework. So here's where we talk about bringing all of the resources that you have to bear. And this is kind of the big picture strategy on what works for communities. And this is a combination of elected officials, institutional leaders, recovery authorities, your key nonprofits, everyone that's in the community that has something to offer, and how you correlate all of those skill sets and the resources that they can bring to bear in a comprehensive overview for your overall recovery and resilience as you build it. You need to empower them. There needs to be role clarity on, who is best at doing what and how you work together. You use that engagement as your engine and your driver for setting priorities, then setting milestones, and, just like you do in any other sort of planning for strategic decision-making and prioritizing those resources so that it takes you where your vision that you've established in this process to bear. So last, excuse me, the emerging recovery focus, and that where we are now moving from short-term recovery into intermediate. Although we are focused on, you've heard us talk about the RSF and the RSG teams and how those work together. We've got, I'm sure y'all are familiar with, in the early days, working in your EOC with your emergency support functions that support that structure and bring all of the agencies together. The recovery support functions do exactly the same thing in the federal practice. So on the city side, what they've done is put together recovery support groups that directly coordinate with those support functions that the federal agencies offer. Sometimes you need all of them. Sometimes they start to collapse on one another as your vision for the future and what you want to do. It's a flexible type of holistic approach for what every community is not the same. As Bo said, every disaster is not the same. So it depends on your needs and the vision that you set for the future. So here I'll just highlight several words that I think are very important, and that is develop the strategies, focus your efforts on the future for risk reduction and reducing your vulnerability, choosing carefully, choosing the solutions that align with the resources. A long-term recovery plan, I've seen them built in the past where they're put on a shelf. There are unfunded mandates. If there isn't a funding structure, if you have nowhere to go and you don't have the budget, it looks great on paper and it's a great vision to have, but strategically, it's more valuable if you can find those resources to bring to bear. So strategically optimizing those resources understanding the disaster impacts and that create the opportunities to move forward, and then evolving from the community and stakeholder priorities to implemented solutions. So all of that happening means that the long-term recovery strategy that you have may and should flex and change as you bring those solutions to bear. So this was just meant to give you a little bit of context on where we are in this overall. I know it gets frustrating sometimes because when you're in it and you live here and it's your community, it's hard to know that you've made huge progress, because you have. But this gives a framework for everyone to have roles and responsibilities to work together and a cohesive solution for the future. That's it. I'm sorry? So this, I'm sorry, this lays out the current RSG structure that I think you guys have seen this slide before. This is how it's working right now with the different groups within the city and the leads that are there leading those teams. They meet on a regular basis and they're getting updates from what things look like on the ground. They're getting information in from the recovery support functions, and they are flexing to meet the demands as they change. So that's it. Thank you.
We're almost ready to actually engage and let you do some talking in just a second. But before we do, I just wanted to say a few other things. With my advisor, not a facilitator.
Do your mic.
I gotta get better at this. Sorry, Dan. Putting my advisor hat on for just a moment before we engage with you. You're getting ready to enter into a process. It's all about leveraging resources from outside of Asheville. And that's because this is, I mean, the whole world, and I was talking to Assistant Manager Woody about this a minute earlier, this is a whole new world of resources and regulations. It's important that we absolutely, not only for Asheville, but for Buncombe County, for Western North Carolina, we fully utilize our skills to leverage resources, to bring resources to Asheville to help you recover. We need to do everything we can, and the more coherent, the more collaborative, the more the messaging is coherent and shared amongst all of you, all the leaders of Asheville, the advocacy is clear and well organized. The more we do those things, the more we're going to be able to bring outside resources to Asheville. In fact, in some instances, communities go through disasters and they actually come out the other side of it better off. Your economy actually can benefit from, in sort of a grotesque way, can benefit from the recovery process if you do things right, if you all work together. And the other thing I'll just mention about Asheville, you're the economic engine. You know this better than I do, although I was born here, by the way, Mayor. I don't think you knew that. But this is the economic engine of Western North Carolina in many regards. The role you play is so critical. The work that you do on behalf of Asheville is also beneficial to the whole region. And the fact that you have the elected leaders that are well-known, you have the platforms, you have the bully pulpit to speak, bring the state resources, bring the federal resources here to Western North Carolina, Buncombe County, and Asheville. It's really contingent on your ability to tell your story, speak coherently, have a coordinated and collaborative plan in place. And I want to remind you that the more you all work together and speak with one strong voice, the more successful you're going to be. Advocating in Washington, advocating when you all are speaking to members of Congress, having a common message, never missing an opportunity to say the same thing over and over again, because that's how you're going to be successful. So I wanted to share that perspective with you, is that it's really important that we all have a common approach and common message to this as you now begin the process of thinking about the long-term recovery. So with that, Emily, I think I'll go ahead and get started on the process here we wanted to do with you, unless there's any questions.
Questions, anybody?
All right, so
Thank you.
now I'm putting my facilitator hat on. I'm no longer advising you, I'm now playing facilitator for this process. And I think what we want to do now, you all should have, and I think we handed those out, the Post-it notes.
Oh, that's.
I'm going to make you do a little
I thought
exercise.
someone was just.
You're going to put your heads down and write for a minute. I want you to sort of, for 4 or 5 minutes, I'm going to ask you to write down what is really important to you as you look at recovery. You think about the long-term recovery. That's really where you set the tone. You're the city council, you're the board of directors that give your amazing city staff and all the other resources that are out there, FEMA, the state of North Carolina, HUD, all these others. You're going to help set the tone. But what is it's really important to you as you think about recovery from this horrible natural disaster?
Bo, in your outline for us, you have, as a part of this question, what issues or problems need to be identified and addressed? Do you want us to get into
I'd
that?
rather
or is that
stay
too
at a
specific?
higher level to start.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
just let's talk about what's really important to you.
Just go at it.
Write them
No matter how
down.
many.
Right? There's. Yeah. Oh yeah. One per sticky note, but you can have multiple ideas. So there.
Oh, I haven't gotten that bad.
And we've actually got a timer.
Oh, that's why we have a Sharpie.
Yeah.
Right, okay, never mind.
I did the same.
I hate writing a Sharpie.
All right. And you can keep writing. All right. Looks like you put some thought into this beforehand. All right, I'm going to go
I
ahead.
feel like we're gonna stick you to death.
Yeah, no, that's okay. We can, and this is not the only shot you get at saying something.
Right, okay. We'll pace ourselves.
Remember, one of the things about recovery, it's long-term. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So it's years. You're getting ready to embark on a journey of many years that will sometimes be very frustrating. But before I do that, I wanted to make something. The city manager brought a couple of things to my attention. That one of the things that you do when you go through this recovery process, you have some milestones and you have some things that you should celebrate. I know that it has been hard. You're talking to constituents and you're getting lots of information. And the staff who are working 14 hours a day, 6-7 days a week, are laboring away, but I did want to acknowledge a couple things that you should celebrate, and those are the successes you've had along the way. For example, through your advocacy and the hard work of your staff, you just got $6.4 million for Category A of funding. That's the debris. So you just were awarded $6.4 million. On Category B assistance, that's the emergency protective measures. You were receiving payments faster than any others that we've seen. I mean, we've heard from the people in this business that your staff are turning things around on getting protective emergency measure funding faster than anyone else. The other thing, and this is very significant, the advocacy coming from the city of Asheville and others, you've been able to go from 75% cost share to 90%. That's huge. That is serious, serious money, and that didn't just happen. That's the work that this city council and your staff have done, talking to Governor Cooper and your legislative delegation, and talking with Governor-elect Stein. And I think the president just very recently announced that you would go to 90%. So that's huge. And then the other thing I just wanted to mention real quick is you were just notified by HUD recently that you're receiving an additional CDBG disaster recovery funds of $1.75 million. So when you hit those milestones, don't forget that you should celebrate those successes, and that's because of the hard work that this city council is doing, advocating and working with your staff and speaking of one mind on the issues that are really important. So I just want to make sure that you don't overlook those successes. Deborah, I don't think you get a chance to do those celebrations very often, so I wanted to make sure that we had that opportunity for you and everyone that's working here. So, all right, let's get into what you have to say. Does someone want to start? Just tell me what's on your most favorite sticky note.
Mine was enabling residents to be able to remain in the area.
Enabling residents to remain in the area. That's good. Like, what's more important, right?
Who else has something like that?
Well, I have full recovery for individuals, so sort of related.
Community assistance and financial recovery probably under there. Somewhere, yeah.
Community assistance and financial recovery.
I'll add, I know we're limited, but in the spirit of that, a right to return, and I know that that predates Helene.
Tell me more, when you say right to return, make sure I understand what that means.
A lot of times when you see, well, first I wanted to thank you for the analogy of a community that's in crisis and going into the ER, and also acknowledging, and I haven't heard this a lot when we're talking about recovery, that many of our community, thousands of people and businesses aren't in recovery phase yet. Still scraping mud out, still mourning
They're
family
still in
members.
the ER.
Right, and so I appreciated that, and I was also thinking about some of the wisdom from 2020 that we learned about giving ourselves room to grieve, that we're not gonna go back to where we were. We have to adapt. We will always have the scars, it will always be different, and we will survive this and move forward. But I think that just talking about recovery loses that opportunity. So by putting right to return with Antonette's comment, I'm thinking about the displaced people before Helene, from redlining and urban renewal. I haven't forgotten our commitments to reparations. And right to return is sometimes when cities and communities that have the right to do this, you can make sure that when a building is repaired, that the people have a right to return to that space, whether it's their residential or commercial property.
That's very good, thank you. Does anybody have anything else you want to add, say, Councilwoman Turner?
Or I have
Yes.
along that assistance for our displaced residents so that they can come back.
Assistance for displaced residents, that fits right with that, that's good, thank you.
Mine is kind of on that line, workforce, the service workers who were displaced, they find meaningful work.
That's nice. That's good. Workforce services for displaced workers, so that they can get positions.
I'll add engage displaced residents and businesses in addition to property owners, so we know what that looks like.
Are we moving into business recovery?
Wait, yeah, if we're moving into business, are we doing, what do you want us to stay on? I'm forgetting
sure
how we started this one.
Yeah, on the displacement, return.
Recovery for individuals, enabling residents to remain in the area, right to return. And then I think you took that for both individuals as well as businesses.
Okay, then I'll add helping business community recover.
We're moving, okay.
Well, in mine,
Is that the same?
kinda. I have two that I don't know where they go.
Well, that's
So
okay.
one is taking steps to ensure businesses, to ensure business resiliency. And then the other is making sure resources are equitably distributed.
They're related, but I'll take the business one first. So I'll just taking steps to ensure business resiliency, so that's the future, thinking
Yeah.
about businesses that are resilient.
When Sage said her.
Okay, I gotta find my business
Yeah.
ones.
So we've got buckets over here now.
And I'll add to that, small businesses are able to rebuild or reopen without incurring major debt.
Small businesses are able to rebuild or reopen without going into debt. Or too much debt, I guess.
Mine
Any of the
is,
business,
I zoomed, because you emphasized high level, so mine is full recovery for our economy, so that would, falls into the business category.
I know, right, we're getting into,
I had not only recovery, but stabilizing, so stabilizing our economy and stabilizing our creative culture, which I put both in that business
both part of your
area.
economy, yeah.
But the creative culture is a really unique,
So that's the
Special
first time we've had anyone refer to the creative culture, the creative arts.
Anyone else have anything around the creative culture, creative arts?
I have something around small
Yes,
business,
thank you.
just making sure that we have small business assistance and grants. And also, we're moving with a sense of urgency.
Tell me more about the sense of urgency.
When I speak to small business owners, they need grants, they need assistance yesterday. And also thinking long-term throughout the winter, would have already been already a slower season for them, making sure that they last and sustain until spring and summer.
Thinking about their short-term needs.
Yes.
Can I add this one onto that?
Yeah,
Include support for commercial land trust for economic stability. A lot of our artist community and entrepreneurs and small businesses were already getting priced out.
include support for commercial
Land
Land.
trust
and,
for economic stability.
yeah.
so there might be like a land use category in there
Yeah.
somewhere, building, when we get there. I guess I'll just add in then, my economic recovery one was about reopening, rebuilding, relocating, and potentially expanding other areas to accommodate higher ground needs. Expanding other areas like the central business district, et cetera, expanding to accommodate
Reopening, rebuilding, relocating, like the Rs.
the Rs.
Yeah, expanding central business district and other areas. So that's rebuilding a little
Well,
differently.
if we can't rebuild in the river,
Yeah.
we need to accommodate that relocation somewhere.
So they're reopening and even leading towards expansion.
Sure, that sounds great.
Can I add then this diversify our economy sticker?
Diversify economy, that's always, it's a good thing, isn't it?
One would hope.
Okay, all right.
So I had one in it, but it's just the same, keep Asheville weird.
Keep up, keep your branding,
Yeah, so I don't know if that's culture or if that's the same.
or all of the above.
Yeah,
I like it.
Yeah.
yeah, I just,
I mean, I sort of interpret that to mean one of the worries after a major disaster is that we lose our local
Right.
flavor, that we
Right.
get an influx of kind of generic change. So weird is like our
A good
unique
thing.
brand. That's
Yeah.
our local weird, our local vibe.
yeah.
Bo, I have a arts one, create resiliency and recovery for the arts community. And I'm thinking about if we ever encounter something like this again, how to better support moving through a disaster for our arts community.
Well, that takes us a whole nother lane.
Well, he said
No,
arts.
it's good. No, it's good.
Yeah.
It's good.
I'm putting, yeah, I mean, it's just generally, yeah.
Merge.
I guess it's not really a culture one, so I'll hold back on
Yeah,
this.
you tell us what,
Well,
I'm just listening to what you're.
Well, I had,
saying and how you're seeing it
Yeah.
together.
in light
Make
of
sure-
us being our economic hub of Western North Carolina, I said, being a regional leader and a build back example for the area.
Yeah, that's good. You're introducing a different topic here.
Oh,
That's
okay.
good. That's good. No, that's good.
Okay.
Regional leader,
Where did you put your,
build back example,
where'd you put your equities?
providing a model.
Well, you know,
For
if our key hub
recovery.
fails, our regional hubs may also. If our key hub thrives, our regional hubs may also.
That's exactly right.
Or it won't be on there.
I mean, Governor-elect Stein said that in his remarks to
Yeah.
the mayors, how important Asheville was to the region.
Right. There's a big one that's not up there. I'm worried we're out of circle, so I'm
what
gonna
is
add
the,
now.
what's the top one?
Oh, good, good.
The top one is reopening and,
Reopening and expanding, so be going beyond the
Okay.
reopening is what you said, and then expanding.
So we can have more signs.
okay, so that's like a catch-all.
Economy, and then.
Isn't that kind of a
Yeah, I
catch-all?
like that. Expanding is always good.
Okay, I got a bunch of catch-alls.
Here's one that's not quite up there yet, community education and participation and how we move forward.
So that's in terms of the recovery
Process.
itself. That's good.
Yeah, I had work with community on solutions.
Community involvement, how can I?
Yeah,
Sure, community
yeah.
involvement.
Is-
Or
Community
community-led
education
recovery.
and
Oh, you're adding
participation,
another,
and how we move
I
forward.
could add more bubbles, because it's just paper and sticky notes, right?
Okay, great,
what did you call that bubble?
because we're
I
weird.
call it community. Community
Involvement.
That's what that one.
That kind of defines Asheville, community involvement. Working with community on solutions,
Yeah.
yeah.
Another one that's not, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just trying to make sure, I'm getting a little stressed out about trying to figure out what category these fit in, so.
Don't worry about the
There's a
category.
bigger bubble here. Yeah, I've got a bigger
Can I
bubble than that might
add,
help.
to the community engagement, implement our plans to honor community engagement we already put in, affordable housing plan, reparations, urban forestry, gap plan, parks, and then align neighborhood grants with the climate justice initiative.
Potentially new bubble, natural environment recovery and redesign.
Natural environment.
Natural environment,
With that, I had healthy, vibrant river ecosystems.
Yeah.
And I also had giving rivers and our economy space to thrive.
Yeah, well, let her jot down the bubble, because there's a bunch. Like, I have,
I got natural environment recovery.
Okay,
Yeah.
so under natural environment, we have healthy, vibrant river ecosystems, giving rivers and our economy space to thrive. It's interesting when you combine the economy and the environment.
So-
Natural
so- They're
environment
competing right now.
recovery and
Would-
redesign.
I have used the opportunity to address stormwater infrastructure. So, and that could be a regional planning. I know we've had stormwater regional planning efforts, but, so,
Yeah, and this
Is that a
is,
separate bubble, like infrastructure?
I don't,
yeah.
don't
okay, are you
think so.
gonna do an
I
infrastructure
think
bubble?
we
Yeah,
need
we
an
definitely need an infrastructure bubble.
Good, you see, this is why I'm getting stressed out about these bubbles.
No, you can, no,
About,
I've got an
she's
infrastructure.
doing you're doing an infrastructure bubble?
yeah.
Yeah, okay, so that's the stormwater one.
That's
Here's
improved upon
infrastructure,
Okay,
utilities
so
planning.
Use opportunity to address stormwater infrastructure.
Add that one. Review and update stormwater task force recommendations.
Here's more.
Ensuring that infrastructure is improved upon, so you're not just rebuilding,
Mm-hmm.
you're improving.
Here's more
infrastructure.
So when the next
And I
time
know,
something happens.
honestly, when you look at this disaster from a perspective of other disasters, the infrastructure here was impacted as much as
Yeah.
any I've
Yeah.
ever seen.
That goes with
Infrastructure.
infrastructure too.
I have full recovery for our city, parks, roads, utilities, so this is all,
I also have redundancy and resiliency regarding critical infrastructure.
yep.
Redundancy and resiliency.
So I have one that is about community resiliency, and what I'm thinking about there is, in the face of a disaster, we saw this very organic community response within neighborhoods, and how to build on that. I mean, I think it was pretty good, but we kind of saw it all snap into place, and it's one thing to theorize about how it would work, it's another to actually see how it worked and how it didn't work. So I would be, because we've had plans about how to create resource centers or
Resilience hubs.
resilience hubs, and I think now we know in real time exactly what that looks like. So when I put community resiliency, I'm meaning in the face of a disaster like we just saw.
Do you want that with involvement, or do you want me to add?
It
I
would
think it's
be,
different.
it probably is more of a infrastructure,
I
yeah.
agree. Can I put this one with that? Because we've been talking
Yeah.
about resiliency hubs since 2021.
Yeah, that's
Okay. All right, here we go.
that's,
So I'm just gonna read these so we get these right. Use opportunity to address community resiliency,
Microphone.
and that is,
Microphone.
and that is neighborhood resiliency hubs.
Yes.
Right.
Shanika brought up.
So
in
you've been
2021.
talking about that for
we,
3 years.
we have planning documents that call for that, so it all just kind of
Yes.
happened.
But I have a question about the natural environment, but tree canopy is part of our living infrastructure, so where does that one go?
natural
Natural environment recovery.
Does that sound right?
Because it's
Sure.
also an
So
infrastructure.
tree
right in
canopy
the middle.
repair under natural recovery.
I have like a whole bucket that maybe is implied in what y'all are saying, but my head was really on preparedness. And so the first thing I wrote was reducing lives lost in future disasters. And then I went on to say using climate science to guide us for future storms, keeping AVL affordable. So there's this whole thing of
Resiliency and preparedness.
preparedness, because I think that your metaphor in the hospital was really nice. And my head is very much in the future, and I appreciate being grounded back in, like, we have a lot. We aren't even out of the hospital yet. And as a climate activist in my day job, I think about, like, how much work we've put into being prepared and how much more prepared we could be. But it falls into all of these buckets. So what do we do to be prepared so that
It could be a value.
citizens are prepared for future storms? So I don't know where it fits, but yeah, it's like a value thing of using climate science to guide us and being prepared, because we've already had 2 massive storms in the last 20 years.
And guess what?
And there's gonna be more. So I don't know where to
I
put
would
that, but
s-
y'all work your bubble magic.
Well,
I would
and so
say
just
under
keep in
community
mind,
resiliency.
Yeah.
You know.
keep in mind, this is the first step
Yeah.
in preparing for your council retreat.
Yeah,
So we're gonna gather this information, and we're gonna do some things between now and then with you
yeah.
that will help sort of
Prepare
guide
us.
that. Does that make-
Can I second something in a way, hopefully this resonates? We have a new emergency operations plan that we used at a systems level, but we could expand that to the neighborhood level.
Yeah, I think that's part of a resilient,
Yeah.
community resilience.
This one's kind of along that, too.
So I'm just gonna read that one back, emergency operations plan at the community and neighborhood.
I will
I
say in
think
the
it reads
county, I
like
think they
neighborhood level.
created their own EOCs. And, I mean,
This one's
it's
related.
seriously,
Is that
like-
Preparedness
Austin
and
has, like,
resiliency.
They were
Yeah.
on there because they had neighborhood captains and
Yeah,
more together.
that's big.
Participatory budgeting one goes under that.
They had, like, command
So this
staff.
one is
Neighborhood EOC.
community disaster planning. Welcome, Bo. Community disaster planning for future storms, like emergency housing planning, evacuation processes, backup utilities, communications, things that, whatever, and the recovery.
Thought
initiatives.
about this a lot, obviously.
So I had one that was,
That's resiliency. Preparedness and resiliency.
I guess it would go under business recovery resiliency, but what I said was diversify the economy, because what I'm trying to think of is areas that aren't necessarily tied to tourism, or I'm going back to COVID when no one could come out, or if no one's coming, what do we do?
What else is there?
I don't know. So I don't know where this goes,
That's good.
but figuring out a way
And remember,
that people can
some
work from
people
home
emerge
if
from
need be.
disasters like this stronger because you have an opportunity to think about those things. Bo, anything else? Councilman Hess.
I have one that may go under infrastructure, is assess water infrastructure redundance. We've been working really hard to get us back in action, but we don't want to miss the opportunity to talk about being stronger next time.
Yeah. Certainly, when droughts happen, we think about redundancy, don't we?
Under,
Bo,
Yes.
you just gotta get in there.
Yes, yes. No, I'm listening, and a lot of these already. I had emergency hubs as well. One of the things, speaking of diversifying our economy, I think maybe looking at and supporting our artists is having a local like APAC, Asheville Performing Arts Center or something. Speaking of building back even better and more resilient. So I'll give you
awesome.
emergency hubs
And
Emergency
economic
hubs on one,
recovery.
and then
yes,
the
and our
economy on the
yes,
other.
diversifying that. Yes.
Love it.
This one's a little random, but I guess because under regional leader, as much as we are the economic hub, we are also the impervious surface hub. And I kind of feel like,
Prestigious title. that we all-
well, I feel like I think about towns like Marshall, downtown, who cannot rebuild in a way. The only way to save a downtown Marshall is to divert water. That's just the reality. Like, what does that mean for our neighbors? Our river flows north. Do we have greater responsibility because we have greater impervious surface?
Yeah.
And assisting our neighbors and protecting them.
Assisting region in water impacts prevention. More impervious surface equals more responsibility. I think that kind of goes almost under infrastructure.
Yeah. Regional leader, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, or-
Anywhere, yeah.
Yeah, oh, yeah, that's right.
Kind of maybe, yeah. Yeah, I don't know, infrastructure, all of it.
My stuff is totally left field, but I think it's important.
Love it.
I think that we should never forget the loss of life
Yeah.
and the trauma experienced. Make sure it's addressed and hope is restored, especially for our frontline workers and bereaved families.
I'll put that with you instead of recovery, consider adaptation and remembering what's lost.
And I have a memorialized tragedy and loss.
I think that's,
Healing?
Healing.
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 I heard
for
healing
residents,
from
yeah.
you.
Healing is good.
yeah.
To add on to that, I had flooding back love. That's a big, I don't know if you've seen this
Flooding
yet,
back
Bo,
love.
but there was a sculpture, a big concrete pile with art on top very early after, and it holds a sign that says flood back
So
love.
it's
and
kind of an organic piece of art.
Absolutely, within days, and I think it's meant a lot to a lot of us, so I was just riffing off of that artist.
Can I pause for a public announcement? Just for viewers who are watching, I know it's hard to see the Post-it notes and the paper here, but we are also simultaneously creating a
Amazing.
Digital
image, thank you, with all of these that we will be able to post and collect with the minutes for this meeting. Thank you.
That's Emily in the back there is just working hard away, and that's available, that's broadcast.
I want to add more to the healing. First, making sure that we're addressing our community's mental health needs, but also making sure that we're supporting the mental health needs, not only in the short term, but the long term of our first responders, our firemen, our firefighters, our local law enforcement that were out there. So I have lifting up our first responders and then also mental health support.
I will add, I did not know this till Deborah said it Friday during our presentation at the Metro Mayors, that we actually had, unfortunately, some of our public works staff found a deceased person. So it's not even just our traditional first responders, if you will, and, you know, so much other tragedy and trauma for all those that worked the entire time through the whole disaster, but just to think about it even broader, and I know we do.
I have a left field one, but I've been thinking about it a lot in the context of more the regional stuff. But, you know, I've spent a lot of time talking to different delegates, Republican and Democrat, and that didn't like matter at all. Everyone was like, what are we gonna do for our community? And then I kind of brought it back to the focused work of this group and just said council working as a team for our community.
Warm my heart.
Yeah. I'm good for the warm and fuzzies.
There you go.
So along that note, I would say vulnerability and clarity from my fellow colleagues, but also allowing for vulnerability and clarification from my colleagues.
Nice.
I will bring up, we have these working agreements from our last retreat, though, that are taped in front of our little
Okay, sweet.
seats here, and it says things like, be open and honest with each other, seek to understand each other's why, lead with compassion, support each other. And there's a part in here about respectful disagreement, and I wanted to bring that up because I think remembering our working agreements, and also when we do disagree, that we do it with care and respect.
So you guys are actually like shifting
in.
right away, naturally.
Wait,
to-
I know you're gonna move on to the next.
Yeah, which is what you've already done, but before we do
Oh,
that,
yeah, we're missing a whole big category. I'm sure staff here is like, what is happening? Because we are not talking about the city part. So so I have a whole bunch of sticky tabs that are full financial recovery for city, use opportunity to grow city staff and capacity. Opportunity, so I just want to make sure, I did have the one in there, an infrastructure about like parks and so on and so forth. So I don't know exactly where it falls, but just thinking about the municipal focused
Yes.
recovery piece of it.
Yep.
So, okay, yeah. There's definitely
I
a
have
Venn
3 for
diagram
that.
of
so
things,
this
but
is
yeah,
sort of getting into the how.
So I have maintain our recovery dashboard, thank you to staff for getting that up and running, re-engage our advisory boards because they're a critical part of our city infrastructure, and then ensure environmental experts are at the table.
This is some of the how.
That's the, yeah, probably getting into
Which
the
are very
how
important.
with the, yeah, with the environmental.
Well, that's good.
One other one, just because we all probably are eager to get rid of all our sticky tabs, make sure they're all up there. But, and I also, we always talk about housing in this body. We're always talking about housing issues. And so I thought it would be, I'm very interested to see how this has impacted our housing stock, our housing availability. I'm certain it has shifted something. So I wanted to use this opportunity to better address housing needs.
Yeah,
So-
you said that American Red Cross piece.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
To better address housing needs.
I had collaboration and partnership, county, nonprofits, community
Very good.
groups.
Yeah.
And then, this is maybe a literal thing, but an appreciation ceremony for all the heroes. Let's have a big event.
Yes. Yes, that would be, I'd second that.
Let's call it a party.
Well, we did we did some things, but a big
Yeah.
old celebration where we can thank Public Works and
Community involved, yeah, there we go.
all the folks.
Bo, along those lines, I have advocacy for resources from state and federal partners, and then transparency and updates from city staff.
Very strategic.
I think this will be my last one. A hyper-clear budget process for the incoming year.
Did you say a very honest
Not
one? Is that what you said?
Hyper-clear.
Hyper.
No, I think we're just gonna have to be more than communicative about this initial
Yes.
budget back. There's just gonna be a lot going on. We had an audit committee and financial committee this morning. We learned we're gonna have to expense things before we can guess at their revenues, and it's FEMA and all this, it's
Yep.
confusing.
It's gonna be hard.
Yeah,
The reimbursement process.
yeah.
Give any budget director a hard time for a couple of years.
The budget with the city recovery.
Yeah, that's fine.
What's missing?
There is a bunch of how stuff
Yeah.
But I kind of was holding back because I know that's the second half of the agenda, and I didn't write stickies for them, but I wonder if you want to merge into there or what have you. Or I just want to name, like, I have more thoughts on how, and I think some already started coming up too.
Yeah, they did.
Well, I am curious too, we haven't talked about equity at all, and I know it's a core value of ours, and I have some. Does anybody else have any?
I have
Antoinette
one
led with it.
that was supposed to be an overarching thing for all of those
Say it.
things up there. No, I just said making
like a
sure
value.
resources are equitably distributed.
And I have racial and economic equity
Yes.
to go with Antoinette's.
So I don't know, because it can go in every,
So
it
this
should
is
go
almost
in
like-
every
It's
bubble.
almost like value-driven recovery.
Yeah,
Yes.
could we do that instead of, I don't know. I guess a bubble of equity makes a lot of sense too. I'm getting lost now in like
Don't worry
sorting it
about the
out.
bubbles, because we're just capturing the ideas, and we're doing our best to
Yeah.
put them in the right bubbles.
Yeah,
Most importantly, capture the ideas.
Yep.
This one's really natural environment recovery. We talk a lot, we're going to talk a lot about floods, but we also need to talk about landslides and steep slopes.
yep.
Yes.
Under the natural environment recovery bubble.
And then I have two that might be economy and might be equity. One is advance our disparity study goals through recovery, and the other one is scale up our contracting with local businesses.
Oh, I love that one.
Those are probably both economy. Business recovery. Okay. Ooh,
I
it's a
know,
lot.
I have this one I just really want to see up there.
You just are writing new ones.
I'm sorry, I'll stop. But, well, there's this idea, like, we're already going to be making decisions tonight around what it looks like to build back in some ways. And I feel like under long-term build back, there needs to be a discussion around whether it's a 100-year, 5-year, 1,000-year mark that we're targeting build
It's
back
just
for.
better, build back better.
Build back better, wait a minute, someone already got that before, didn't they?
I've heard that phrase.
Something there before.
So along that note,
Yes.
our idea of Build Back Better might be a little different than maybe our constituents. So I'd like collaboration among all of our stakeholders and their input and engagement.
We'll get under our community engagement
And
bubble.
I'll stop now. Did you get all yours up there?
No, I mean, I'm with.
I still have this one.
So these are all about.
Do you, I mean, I have used opportunity to plan for future disasters, but that's sort of in the
Preparedness.
preparedness, resiliency. So I mean, this one may be duplicative, so
Well,
I'll resist.
We have a lot of ideas of this.
Yeah.
Probably too many.
There's one that feels bundled that I'm curious about, because when bringing up the equity, and equity is a lens that should be addressed in all of it, there was one I wrote about, like, use climate science to drive us, that I feel like we see so many people just build back in a rush because of anxiety about their economy. And so that's one of those things too, of like having the climate science drive our stuff needs to be an overlay in the natural recovery, in the infrastructure, in the economy, and all of it. So I just want to say that out loud.
a
that it's-
resilient.
I didn't understand what you were saying.
I guess what I'm saying is following the science, like
Right.
not like using climate science to
Don't
guide
do
us.
more of the same, just, yeah.
Maybe not keeping our
Be-
head in
be
the
in-
sand about
Be
this
intentional.
happening
Yep.
again.
And so
about
that's
how
like,
you build.
yeah, that's a value, that's an overarching thing for every bucket. Thanks.
Me, I got something.
You got something, let's
Okay.
do it.
So when we were in the thick of things and we were in survival mode, the message was, we're all in this together. But when it's time to rebuild, it's like the have and have-nots, right? Everybody's rushing to rebuild and recover and get back to the norm. But I think we should maintain the message that we're all in it together. Yeah,
Make that
make that,
an under-
okay.
Yes.
a foundational. Yeah, that's good. Let's get that sticky note up there.
Maybe this one fits in the equity bucket, but I don't want to forget that we have issues and disparities that were amplified by Helene that predate Helene. Disparities around housing, education, wages, income, public safety and health and well-being, infrastructure and investment in neighborhoods. Because I was looking through like what Maui's dealing with, and this like temporary housing has unintended consequences for a community. And the mayor noted that they wish they had had permanent housing solutions first and instead. So, that's what I'm considering.
Okay. All right. I think the Post-it notes are all up. Now I want to just shift gears just for a minute and talk about what you all need to work together. Work together amongst yourselves, work together with your community, but think about just for a minute what you need to work together well, to work together with, that help you achieve all the things you've talked about here. You think about the things that you've talked about, how you would like recovery to look, and the things that you think are important. What is it you need to do to help you get there? Does that?
Data.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we have stood up a dashboard. I think it's gonna be enhanced to be better and better, but measurables to be able to track whether we're making progress or not. And so that can be around everything, around housing units, people who are still unhoused, business operations, employment, unemployment, all the things, all the metrics we need to measure to be able to say, okay, here's where we were in December of 2024, now it's July 2025. Well, did we make any progress here? Where are we still lacking? So at a very basic level, just thinking about the patient still in the hospital, you need a lot of data. Some of these things are, we need to, okay, so we need that. So, and to add to that piece of it, we're gonna have recovery efforts that are county-led, that are gonna be existing in other municipalities and other counties. And then we have a state effort that will also be trying to track the recovery progress and looking at data. So that's a big piece of it. We might have something more unique we want to look at here in Asheville that they're not tracking on a whole regional level, like how many commercial properties were affected, how severely were they damaged, how many have applied for permits to rebuild, how many have not, those kinds of things. So, and I think that's actually the easiest part. The harder part is then addressing a lot of these. What does business recovery look like? What does it look like to look at resiliency and our environmental issues, stormwater, rezoning, planning and zoning, all that.
So I'll just sort of restate what you said in my not as smart mind. And that is understanding where we are, having a way to measure progress, and therefore know where we're going. And having a foundation of information is the best way to move forward and measure your progress. Are we achieving our goals? How do we know if we're achieving our goals? How do we measure?
Yeah, and for the city, it's gonna have lots of nuts and boltsy things too, like how many parks are out of commission? And 6 months from now, how many parks are out of commission now? And what's the timeline for rebuilding each park? What about roads? We have several roads that are still impassable in the city and bridges that are broken. We have, of course, terrible traffic jams now because of it. So those are a lot of just kind of the functions of everyday life that we need to track and bird dog and understand. And I think this council needs to weigh in on in terms of priorities for that very basic rebuilding effort.
And that's part of the long-term recovery.
I hope it's not that long but
Well,
yeah. Because we got a traffic jam right now on I-240,
Somewhere.
I can tell you what.
We have these things, they're also behind you on the podium. This is from our last retreat. There are working agreements on how we'll work together with each other, so I thought maybe these are worth
It's almost like
mentioning.
we should post that up there. Right?
It's right behind you too.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, there it is. Behind
as
you.
far as how do we get there, we have,
But are you asking,
Yeah.
are you asking not only how we literally work together
Yeah, that's
as a
one.
council, but
What
what
tools
do
do
we
you need?
need?
What will support you in getting
Yes.
that? So not necessarily behaviors, but what's going to look like
Oh, okay.
support for you?
I'm the type, you all may not be like this, but I'm the type that likes a lot of discussion. I could talk
too.
about this with you all for hours, and it would help my kind of thinking. I know, there's some chatter and laughter.
How many hours? Dave?
Well, I just mean
How many
that,
hours?
sometimes there is value in that just frank discussion and questioning things rather than just here's the way, Well, maybe the retreat will be helpful for that.
Discussing where we don't have to decide at the same time.
Right, that's helpful.
You know, I would
Creating a
appreciate
forum for that is what you're saying.
an equal dissemination of information. That would be really helpful for me. So data.
Those are really important things to capture.
That is, that is challenging. Yes.
I like the
I mean,
Google sheet.
well, I'm just thinking, you know, now I will be serving as co-chair of the WNC Recovery Task Force with Senator Corbin as my co-chair, and we will have, like, we have our first inaugural meeting Thursday.
Okay.
And it will be at Land of Sky, happens to be the meeting forum. So it's hard because there's all these things happening around recovery, which is good, but then, you know, you get exposed to all this information, but your council sisters and brothers did not. So you need to, some of it I try to, like, if I'm like, oh, they all are gonna wanna see this, you know, I try to push it out.
And
Yeah,
I think that's especially important because the role Asheville plays in the broader regional recovery too.
And for this question, again, it's for us as a council, because part of what okay, us as a council. I'm
Sure,
gonna keep
that's
it with
one.
that.
Yeah,
Okay.
let's stick with that.
Okay,
one.
cool.
Is that helpful?
Yeah, because I just am thinking about, like,
What
there's a
else
lot
do
of people in the community that know way more about a lot of this stuff than I do, and so, like, what are the forums to hear from them? But I like that you're keeping us as a council, because we need to think about that, too.
Yeah, but we won't forget what you just said.
Yeah, when we come to it, I'll.
well, I will say, I think what would be helpful for us is to identify of these things, what are projects that we envision are just for us and the city? What are things that we think need to be done in collaboration with, say, the county or NGOs or maybe even regionally?
Or all the above.
Or all of the above, right. So, you know, Dogwood has expressed an interest in helping support a housing study. So, for example, maybe there's a collaboration around that topic. Like, so, I'm not for us to figure all that out today, but
No, but I think
yeah.
it's important that you recognize, so what you're saying is, what you need to know is, to work well together, you might want to know what are the resources we have, and where can they be applied?
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's what you just asked.
Yes, no, yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, when you talk about stormwater or environmental recovery or even like tree canopy or, you know, I just imagine it's not just on our shoulders, that we will want to collaborate and we'll need to collaborate.
Right, I'm taking my facilitator hat off and putting my advisor hat on for a second. There are a lot of people that want to help you. A lot of state agencies, government, federal agencies, nonprofits. I think the challenge will be, how do we best utilize those resources, recognizing that your city staff have a city to run. Oh, and by the way, they now have a multi-billion-dollar recovery program on their shoulders as well. How do you, as a city council, enable them to give them the ability to help coordinate all those resources, but in a way that they can actually do all that work? And that's a real challenge.
Well, maybe some of that
Sorry, Deborah's probably shooting darts at my back over here.
also said is, like, what's the governance, what's the infrastructure for all that collaboration?
Right.
Like, the design of that is not simple, and I think earlier Haggerty presented a task force. That could look like a million things, but I'm ready to, like, roll up our sleeves, because I think the sooner we
Start that.
we get beyond 7 people who are
Yeah.
elected, but part-time people, to, like, you know, like, the sooner we get that established for
And I
this,
think
the
it's my
stronger we
perception
will
that would be part of your retreat,
Yeah.
would be to have conversations around
Well, and I'm going to layer in identifying a work plan and a timeline. Because I feel like, if only because we need to know, you know, general direction and duration for the community's sake, but also because we all have other jobs.
Yeah.
And for us to really actively participate, we need to know,
Plan.
we're working on this thing in a few weeks, homework time, you know what I mean? Maybe I'm just that way, but a plan,
No,
a
if you
work
have a lot
plan. We
to
do
do,
that in
you
our
have
boards
to,
and
yeah.
committees, it's a common thing for us to have a work plan, so maybe getting this into something, putting a timeline on it,
So I'm hearing you say you would also like some sort of
structure.
strategic plan for this,
Imagine
Yes.
that.
which is exactly what a long-term recovery plan is supposed to, as one of the
But even like the
components
timeline of the planning
of
of the
the plan
plan.
itself, yeah.
Yeah,
How do you plan for a plan?
planning from the plan. I'm a planner. Let's
Yeah.
all plan.
Speaking of planning, I think also for any ideas or things that come up from city staff, like having a realistic timeline when anything would get done or completed or executed, would be helpful. That way we can communicate truthfully and accurately to the people who come and ask us about, X, Y, and Z.
Realistic, I like that too.
Yes. Realistic.
You know, one thing that maybe isn't up here, we have talked a lot about community participation, our own goals. We have a really robust and skilled staff, and where we layer their opinions, help, assistance, et cetera, in is probably in here somewhere. They're not on the board yet, other than for appreciations, but I don't know where you put that. But to do this, to work well together, we need to be in sync with our staff and feel like they, you know, value the work too and value the outcomes and goals.
That makes sense because they have to do the work.
They have to do the work, yeah.
We're just the board.
There's a period that community participation being in sync with your staff, you talk to, trying to capture as you're talking.
Yeah.
Forums to hear from community experts, you know, who you can collaborate with, what the resources are, and governance around that. Identifying, I think what you said there was, projects proposed for one of the projects for the city, for the county, for the region, and identifying kind of what that work plan is and the timeline, that overall strategic plan. So that's kind of a, okay, there.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
That's good.
We talked about this a little bit already, but I haven't heard it yet today, so I'm just gonna repeat it. We've made some infrastructure investments in our community center so that we can have more in-person meetings and hybrid meetings. But we can't just engage our community in surveys and work sessions where there's no public engagement. So I think some way to engage in person and go to the communities where they are, instead of people having to come here, will be important.
That's really good. That's a very specific.
I also want to build on that theme of, I don't want to go back in time to go forward. We've had 5 million visioning sessions with our community. They have told us a vision. And this is different. It's recovery. I get that. But we have so many plans in place already. And so I'd really love to fast forward any parts that we can, not so that we can distill and kind of comb through all the millions of recommendations we've already had and kind of jumpstart things, so that when we're asking community to engage, it's not from a blank piece of paper, because we do that often in our planning processes. And I think that that's a potential place to fast forward. So leverage past plans to
Yeah,
accelerate
incorporate.
us looking forward.
I have a post up there from earlier, if that reflects or adds to what you're saying, about our community engaged plans around affordable housing, the GAP plan, stormwater task force. I don't know if it needs to come out of a bubble and how we worked well together, but we put it there earlier. It might be under community engagement. The list of plans, yeah.
It's good. I feel like we've kind of got a lot here. And it's also gonna really, I mean, this is a really good starting point for planning your retreat.
Can I give them one other question?
Yeah, go for it.
What, the flip side of it, what would get in the way of you making progress?
So the question was, what would get in the way of you all making progress?
How you're working together. Staying
Funding,
close.
funding.
Funding.
I mean,
Or lack of funding?
lack of funding is really what we need now.
You know, I'm not sure that
I think we're
there
gonna get
is funding. I mean, one of the challenges around it is we have hired Haggerty, so we have someone to help navigate all the, you know, hidden little buckets of funding sources for different things. It seems like, you know, you constantly hear about, well, there's this program if you want to rebuild a water system within 100 yards of a river next to an endangered frog species or something, whatever. There's these, you know, little grant programs that if you go harvest them all, you can find a lot of funding. I think it's more how we're going to manage this on a staffing level and the staff capacity. I mean, we clearly cannot do all this work with our current in-house staffing. Like, that's not happening. So we need to figure out, you know, if our administration feels like they can increase their staffing or contract, since a lot of this isn't forever work, right? It's like gonna be topic specific, and maybe there's an opportunity to contract it out. And my understanding is we can get reimbursed for a lot of that contract cost because it is recovery work. It's just a lot to manage too. I mean, even if you are contracting, right, you're still interfacing with city staff and someone's managing the contract and those kinds of things. So that to me is more the biggest challenge. First of all, is just how to structure that within the city and how that works from a management standpoint. You know, and then it gets into what's housed with us, what's not housed with us. I mean, one example I'll give: we have a stormwater task force that came up with stormwater. An incredible, they did a study, they have a whole set of recommendations, they did a report. They're a basically volunteer group because Asheville's so fortunate to have pretty much a whole fleet of subject area experts in stormwater. And we have NOAA here, so we have, and you know, basically what happened when they made their recommendations, the city sort of said, look, we're just the city of Asheville. Stormwater, water quality management, that's a regional issue. You've got water quality issues in Asheville because they originally deal with, this is a state level issue. So thank you very much for your study, but like, we don't have a way to bite onto this and figure out how to incorporate it into our work plan. Other than what the building code and our current code tells us to do around stormwater management and our own stormwater capital plan. So I worry that we just bump into stuff like that. Just because the storm happened doesn't mean we don't continue to bump into the same barriers we had before the storm.
I'm not facilitator now, I'm advisor. So one of the things we did with Hurricane Floyd was we had a collaborative effort where folks that had something to bring to the table actually had to bring it to a group and make sure that it fit what you wanted to accomplish.
Right.
Your city staff didn't have to do that housing study, but they told somebody what we would like to see if they did a housing study. If it comes to doing, you know, an environmental restoration, the city might not be able to do it themselves, but there's somebody else that would do it. And you've established the goals for that. So it fits into the broader collaborative effort so that it's all pulling in the same direction. And that's the unique thing that the city has. And for having worked in the federal, state government, you are in a really extraordinary position because you're closest to the people. Those other government agencies and NGOs want to serve the people. So if you have your act together and know where you want to go and what you want to accomplish, they will just plug right in. They want to help, and they respect the role that cities play because you are closer to the citizens. And it's an extraordinary opportunity. So that's a strategic question. And are there mechanisms in place to make that fit what you want to accomplish? Does that make sense?
No. So how does, well, who's the they? Who's the they that's the clearinghouse in deciding?
That's something that has to be developed.
So so in your scenario, there's some, like a task force or something that's like Haggerty's recommending, where it's city and external partners, and it's sort of sitting there figuring out.
And they all bring their interest to the table. And it's like a clearinghouse where everyone is bringing their ideas to the table. And the city's part of that, and they say, well, that doesn't really fit what we're trying to accomplish.
Right, okay.
If you did it this way, it would actually fit our measurable goal that we've already set.
So I think it's a really important structure to establish whatever we decide upon, because very often, predating the storm, we sit here And many groups come to us with a thing that's really not just an Asheville thing, it's like, it's a county thing, or it's a regional thing, but they lay it on our feet because we're very accessible, or whatever, I don't know exactly why it happens that way.
You have to be in the center of the region.
Yeah, and then we struggle with how to respond to it, and whether we should be responding to it, or we should do our own thing. And so it would be very attractive to me to be able to set up a governing system, oversight system, strategic leadership system, whatever, for recovery that does clear that out, so that it says, okay, if we're gonna do stormwater, we're not just gonna go lay it on the feet of the city of Asheville, we're gonna figure out how to pull in all the partners that need to be a part of this solution.
And there's some really cool precedents in the West, of basically having like,
Western part of the country.
the Intermountain West, of having like watershed management districts. So their application and their use is applied different. It's not necessarily for disaster recovery, but it essentially brings in every player that touches that watershed. Their issue is scarcity, but it has representatives from the sectors that touch the water, from the state, from the region, and so it becomes really a regional thing at the watershed level. I haven't seen that as much in disaster recovery, but definitely these task force, like, what would get in the way if we were too insular that we're only solving for the city? You know, like, this is not just the city. What we do and what the county does, what if we're doing different things? That doesn't work. And so, but I don't think we have a lot of precedents in our region for this type of, we just don't have precedents for surviving a disaster. So setting up this type of infrastructure is really complex, and who would be in charge and how would we staff it, like all that can get a little daunting, honestly. But I think that if we just think of it as the city surviving, we are gonna have, our ambitions are gonna be too low for the moment of opportunity.
So I've captured that with don't be too insular looking like the city. You previously talked about having governance for your collaboration.
Yes.
And I just wrote down those words, having a clearinghouse to find resources. And you can, that would be something that would support you getting to recovery. You don't have to know how yet, but that's what we're looking for.
It does seem something that we bump into a lot, would maybe be an understatement, is we put community engagement at the end after we've kind of started to bake the cake. And then the community says, we didn't want cake, we wanted pie. And so we have to go back to scratch, and it takes a lot of time when we do that. And I heard, Bo, you were speaking to urgency, and these are urgent times. And if we don't find a way to keep the community at the table regularly, then they will send us back to the table. They will say, start over again. So I was even thinking about in the recovery framework and all the different roles that we have, I didn't see the community in there, even though we're all members of this community and we all are survivors of Helene. So I'm just kind of like wrestling with how to say that. I am hearing from our peer survivor cities, whether it's fires, floods, landslides, earthquakes, keeping the people at the table and in the front of the conversation is your greatest asset. And it's also, if you don't forget to do it, your greatest weakness.
I agree with so much of that. I had written down community participation early and often, or we will hit walls.
Yeah.
And it's true, we just don't, it's true, we tend to bring information and get a reaction from the community as opposed to planning with them. We don't always do this. We're good at community engagement too. But in this kind of situation, we may get really far along in a process and then find that the community didn't feel involved enough, doesn't understand, and we
didn't get
have to slow
buy-in.
down, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's good. You've done a lot of strategic visioning with your community too. That's the other thing that's really helpful, acknowledging that.
Right, building on it.
Yes, we have many planning documents that involved a lot of community engagement.
But also really meeting with groups. This is something we didn't necessarily plan for, but as communities were organizing, as business groups were organizing, we were readily available to attend their meetings, answer questions as best as we could, and I think a lot of that will be needed.
So is that part of keeping the community at the table?
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know that it warrants another note.
That's
but-
something you need to do to be
Yeah.
successful.
Oh, we also need to multiply each of us, probably like
Yes,
5
multiply.
each. I mean, I joke, and this is
How
like a
about being
vulnerable space,
accessible
but
to the
like,
community
we're all part-time,
for-
is that
for
really gonna
information or
serve
As
the
needed.
grace?
I just
Yeah.
learned that the New York City Council is
We got 2
51
votes
members.
really quickly.
We did get 2 votes quickly.
We need a new
Bigger than our
chamber.
state senate.
I'm just kidding, staff, don't worry, we're not gonna be.
Staff, there is a lot of whispering in the staff gallery right now.
Okay,
right,
team, I don't want to cut you all off, but I
No,
do
I
want to
think we're
give
there.
council like a minute to reset before they
We're there.
sit for very long.
All right, so we've captured this. We're going to work with you, with the city management team. This will help inform the process we designed for your council retreat. So this is an incredible step forward.
I have a thought on, have you ever worked with a council where there's like a subcommittee helping design the agenda, so it's,
For the retreat.
Yeah.
Yes, we have done that many times.
I think that could
Okay.
be really interesting.
We're here to serve. I think that's great.
Yeah, I always work with staff on the retreat and have already been working with them on it. And if there are other council members that want to be involved in that process, just let me know and I'll figure that out. And the retreat, I'm remembering we moved the date because of.
Valentine's.
No, we didn't know. It was because Chris Coral needs his banquet room for some concert or something or other.
Oh, it's not Valentine's now?
No, it is. Okay, we're doing it. We're doing it. Okay, never mind. Cancel that. That was,
Those events bring money. No.
yeah, no. Okay, good. We're good. We're back on track.
All right, well, I will defer to the city manager if there's any closing comments about the process leading us forward.
No, just to thank you, council. Appreciate your time. For some of you, it was your second meeting today, and now we have a third one going into the business meeting. I do have a couple of reflections in terms of, Mayor, a comment that you made about staff capacity. Our capacity to do what it is that you want us to do will be based on what is it that you want us to do. And I think trying to achieve all of that, no, we absolutely do not have staff capacity, but I don't think that that's what what this session was about. This session was about, let's kind of have a brainstorming around what's really important to us. As we move into the retreat, we're going to have to get a lot more specific, though, because specific about not only the what, but the role of the city in the what. Because, and the mayor and I had this conversation about recovery. Number one, we have to define that. What does that mean from a community perspective? When do we know we've achieved recovery? What's the indicators of recovery? But more importantly, recovery is a community effort. There is definitely a leadership role for government, but it's not solely our responsibility. And I loved when you all started talking about individual responsibility, the community, neighborhoods, all of us have to work together to create the future Asheville that I think most of us want in terms of, when we say build back better, it's not that Asheville was bad. It was, there's a new reality in terms of environmental challenges and things that, it's real, y'all. It's real. And we've got to respond in a real way and not ignore it and not think that, well, if we don't change, it'll just go away. It's not. And so thank you all for your time. When I was in Charlotte, we always had a committee that worked on the retreat. So that definitely isn't new. We're not intimidated by having council members. In fact, we want to make the retreat responsive to what your concerns are. So thank you all for your time and for staff for helping us organize this and for Fountain Works this was ingenious. Thank you. can gavel us out
Okay,
if you
all
want.
right. With that, we're adjourned from our work session, and we'll take a break till we start the council meeting at 5 o'clock.